Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In this video, you have my 2023 year in review. So what I'm going to do, I don't have a set script or plan for the statistics that I'm going to go over, except to show you the data that I've collected using my various data collecting spreadsheets and StoryGraph and etc. What I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with my actual reading stat tracker. I did a compilation of reading stat trackers here. I put together the compile spreadsheet from GU with Book Roast. I combined a little bit with Covers with Cassidy. But going forward in 2024, I actually purchased the spreadsheet that Adley from Hardback Quarter put together. So my stats will look a little bit different next year. But let's switch over. I've started the screen recording and take a look at my reading for 2023. The first things that you see here are my overall stats. The books read per month. Obviously, November was the highest. That was my Goodreads Choice Awards project month. That's when I was trying to read through the most books, although it's not actually that many more than a few other months this year. I think my stats are a little bit off because I haven't updated the last 3 books that I read in December in this spreadsheet. So these stats are just a little bit inaccurate. StoryGraph is going to have some updated information. When we go to the pages read per month, again, November is going to be the highest. October is the lowest. That was the month that I read. It looks like not necessarily the least, but it felt like the least because that's when I was doing a lot of Sims playing. StoryGraph is actually going to show some books DNF'd for each month. I did not keep track of that in the spreadsheet, but I'm going to moving forward. Hours listened to per month, clearly. November is when I was doing all the audiobook listening all the time to get in all of those Goodreads books. I'm not sure what this one is supposed to be here, but language read in, I didn't actually read that many books in Spanish. I kind of fell off on that. I need to start that back up again. Reading method, only a handful were ebook, and those were primarily e-arcs through NetGalley and some for the SESL project and things like that. Audiobook was actually slightly more than physical, which in previous years you never would have seen. But I have a feeling that that trend is going to continue. As far as rereads go, I reread only 1 book, but I don't even remember what book that was at the moment. I don't tend to do a lot of rereading, although I have in the past. Series or standalone, I read a lot of standalone books. Unfortunately, a lot of these were ones started. So I started 69 series this year. Oops. I didn't continue on with all of them because you can see here 13 of those I'm not continuing any further with. And there's probably a few more in there that I'm not continuing with that I just didn't keep track of here. Series finished this year, 29, not too shabby. My bare minimum goal was 1 per month, which is 12, so I doubled that. Sequels read this year, 38, so I did continue with several series, which is not too shabby. I'm going to skip through the books read for readathons. I kept track of that at the beginning of the year, but then didn't keep track of that, so those stats aren't accurate. This was supposed to be about publishers. I started off tracking that, but then decided not to continue with that. When we get to book length, it's clear that the sweet spot for the books that I read is between 300 and 400. I do read a significant number that are in the 400 to 500, and even a few that are longer than that. However, with the types of books that I tend to read a lot of for the different projects, most of them are going to be in this sweet spot here. Book format. Most of the books I read were novels. There were some graphic novels. Nonfiction was actually 20%, which is not too shabby. A huge part of that is probably the memoirs. Novella, not that many. I don't tend to read a lot of novellas. Books original language, there was one that was originally written in French. I think that was one of the graphic novels that I read. Most of the books that I read in Spanish as well were not originally in Spanish. They were translated to Spanish. How I got it. This is technically not necessarily accurate. I did read 52 arcs, although some of them I counted it as from the library if by the time I read it, I got the book from the library. So I need to figure out how I'm going to categorize those ARCs that I received, but didn't get around to reading them until I had a physical copy. I need to work on that. Most of them, though, I got from my own books. Considering the amount that I have on my own TBR, is not too shabby. Star rating, I did not give anything below a 2-star, which is great. I didn't read any terrible books this year. No, I did. I just remembered, it's not showing up on here. This little sliver right there, that's that absolutely detestable book that I regret reading. But yeah, that's only one out of 351. Not too shabby. Most of my reads were 4-star reads, which is phenomenal. I enjoy that a lot. I'm so glad. This is actually solid stars. This one over here is with half stars. And most of the 2-star ratings were actually 2.5 stars, which is not that bad. I had 100 4 stars and 75 4.5 stars, which is really good. Age category, this is not too shabby for a distribution here. I have 1/4 middle grade, a little bit more than 1/4 young adult, and about half adult. Publication year, most of the ones that I read were this year because I did read a lot of ARCs, and then I did have my Goodreads project. So most of them were this year, then 2022, and then 2021, which makes sense. A lot of my SESL books were in 2021. And there's a variety for some of the others. Author, let's see. I did not track individual rep, like what it was exactly, but most of the authors that I read from were a person of color, which I love. The written by overwhelmingly women, a handful of multiple authors, and a very small percentage, only about 20% men. Not too shabby. Nationality, it is an overwhelming number of American. There's some that I default to as not known because it doesn't say. Some I'm not sure of, and I'm not really all that sure of how to broaden this, although I really want to. I have 60% new authors, which is really cool. As far as number of books per authors, there's only 2 that the sliver is wide enough that you can see the number. That's Brandon Sanderson. I had all 4 secret projects. I also had Defiant and White Sand. Those were the 6 books for Brandon Sanderson this year. So a repeat year, I've read a lot of his books. And then V.E. Schwab, because I read the entire Darker Shades of Magic trilogy as well as Fragile Threads of Power this year. Chloe Gong, I also read, I think 3 books by her, Last Violent Call, These Violent Delights, as well as Velheart Huntsman. So those are the ones that got repeats on here. Oh, also, I forgot, Jen Lyons, my favorite series, read 5 books by her. Main genre, no one is surprised that it is fantasy. I am what I am. I'm not going to deny it. 40% of the books that I read were fantasy. Then we have second largest being contemporary. I'm not sure what main genre means. Maybe that was an error on the spreadsheet on how I selected it. And then memoir. This is more than likely because I read through the memoir section of the Goodreads Choice Awards. And then a secondary tier under that, science fiction and historical fiction. I have a feeling that this might change a little bit going into next year, but I'm not 100% sure. So there are my stats based on my reading tracker. Now I'm going to switch over to Storygraph. Okay, so as you can see here, the first book I read this year was Wingbearer. I really want to continue in that series. It was really well done. And the last one that I read was Assistant to the Villain. Interestingly, this is a graphic novel. This I read as an audiobook, neither traditional novels. I read 353 books. Most of them were audiobooks, over 2,000 hours of audiobooks. Although to be fair, those hours are the traditional hours of the audiobook, not listened to in actuality because I listened to it on a faster speed. This is a mood map of my reading. So apparently lighter books push the line up and darker books push it down. So apparently it was slightly darker. It's like depressing in the year. I'm not sure what to make about that. Then if we look here, obviously, November. The minutes listened, primarily audiobooks, number of books finished, all the way up here in November. That makes sense. Met all of my goals here. The genres that I spent the most time with. Fantasy, obvious. Young adult and middle grade are not genres. They're not genres. They are age categories. Anyway, historical, that makes sense. I don't understand this one. I don't read romance books, so I'm not sure about this, and I can't click on it to see which books count as romance. Longest book I read was Morganvale. This took a lot to plow through. Shortest was the graphic novel in the Villains series. Average length was 374 pages. It says around 3 days to finish each book. There are a lot of books that I read in a day, and it puts this right here, least time spent 1 day. That's the smallest category that they have on here. There were several that fit this. This I was reading periodically throughout a semester, completing a course, so that makes sense. It wouldn't have taken 102 days to read it otherwise. Authors that I spent the most time with, as we saw on my reading stat tracker. I think if this included more than 3 authors, Jen Lyons would also be up there with 5 books. Average rating was 4 stars. Not too shabby. These are all of my 5-star books, my 5-star reads. These are all amazing books. My overall ratings, these are all the memoirs. I don't rate memoirs. We don't talk about this book. And then obviously mostly 4 stars, etc. Apparently, January was my best reading month with a 4.2 average, but June was not. I don't know why. I don't remember what I read in June. The most pages read was in June, but my average rating was lower. The most users here was I'm Glad My Mom Died. If we looked at my Goodreads list, most shelved, it's Fourth Wing. Unfortunately, over 1 million people shelved that. I don't understand for that book. This, the least shelved, both on Goodreads and on Storygraph, is this book, which was phenomenal. My highest rated average on Storygraph is Running While Black. Definitely deserves it. This is phenomenal. I'm glad they chose to highlight that. I read 236 new authors. 148 of the books were part of a series. I reread 7 books. This is where we get my DNF stats. I don't think that all of the books that I decided to DNF are actually on here, but there are 8, which for me, who hardly ever DNF'd before this, that's really well done. So if we look at this, the 8 books that I DNF'd, this one was not good. These were formatting. This one I don't remember. This was a formatting issue because it was an ARC that I received, which is unfortunate. Do you remember that one? So I know that there were more that I DNF'd. I just don't necessarily always log them, but I need to. This is not 100% accurate because I don't have all of the books that I own marked on here, but I need to work on that. 17 reading challenges. This is interesting. I thought for sure that I read more books in 2023, but apparently I read less, interestingly enough. My audiobook listing was way up. That does not surprise me. My mood map compared to my friends. Components of my highest rated reads. This is really interesting. Hopeful, adventurous, emotional. Thinking back to the books that are on my top rated books, my top 10 lists, this makes sense. Pace, medium, fiction, etc. This is really interesting. The genres as the components. I don't understand that. Story style, character driven. I am a character driven reader. The characters are flawed and well developed. Makes sense. And then these, at a glance, are all of the books that I read in 2023. That is kind of an outrageous number of books, if I do say so myself. So there we go. There's my 2023 year in review. Maybe next year I'll have some more analysis and insights to share. But for now, I'm happy with my past reading year, and I hope for even better to come in 2024. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.